kind of have to pick a lane.
Right.
You know, you're either doing the whole golden age story where everything is booming, the economy's up, the military is just unstoppable, or you're doing the tragedy.
The fall from grace.
Yeah, the tragedy where this flawed genius loses absolutely everything in a single afternoon. But today, for this deep dive, we actually don't have to choose.
No, we really don't. Today's deep dive is honestly like reading a screenplay for a high-budget historical drama that has both of those things.
It really is.
We're looking at a very specific slice of history from the Kingdom of Judah. Specifically, we're pulling from 2 Chronicles, chapters 26 and 27.
Right, so we are tracking the reigns of 2 kings today. Uzziah, who you might actually see referred to as Azariah in some of the other texts, and his son Jotham.
Exactly.
And just to set the stage for you listening, the source material we're working with today isn't just some dry list of dates and battles.
From it.
We've got the biblical text, obviously, but we also have some really fascinating historical commentary and expositional notes that kind of flesh out the geopolitical and economic reality of the time.
And our mission here is actually pretty specific. We want to figure out how these 2 men achieved what was arguably the absolute peak of Judah's power.
Massive military dominance.
Massive, and economic expansion. But we also want to pinpoint the exact moment where what our source calls the order of life got completely inverted.
The order of life.
Yeah.
I really like that phrase. It sounds a bit ominous, though.
It does.
So let's unpack this. We're going to start with Uzziah. And, I mean, talk about a rough first day at the office. He becomes king at just 16 years old.
16. And you have to remember the context here. He isn't stepping into a stable, peaceful situation.
Not at all.
His father, Amaziah, had literally just been assassinated in a conspiracy.
Right. The sources mention that Amaziah turned away from the Lord and ended up being killed by his own people.
Yeah.
So Uzziah inherits this traumatized kingdom, a huge power vacuum, and probably a terrifying amount of court intrigue.
Oh, absolutely.
But despite that absolute nightmare of a start, he ends up reigning for 52 years.
Which is a lifetime in the ancient world.
It's unheard of.
It really is. And the text gives us the core principle for that longevity right up front. It explicitly says, as long as he sought the Lord, God made him prosper.
That's basically the thesis statement of his entire life.
Exactly. And he didn't do it alone either. The source mentions he had a mentor named Zechariah.
Yes, Zechariah. The text says he had understanding in the visions of God.
Which is crucial, because it shows Uzziah was grounded. He had someone giving him a perspective that wasn't just about political maneuvering or surviving the court. It was actual spiritual direction.
Okay, but here is where it gets really interesting for me personally. Usually when we talk about ancient kings, we picture them sitting on a throne or maybe riding in a chariot looking very imposing. But the source highlights this specific personality quirk of Uzziah's that I just absolutely love. It says he loved the soil.
It's such a unique detail to include, isn't it? He loved the soil.
He was a farmer king.
He really was. It paints this picture of a man who was just deeply connected to the land itself.
And the deep dive materials go into serious detail about this massive agricultural infrastructure he built. He wasn't just, planting a nice little royal garden.
No, not at all.
He was digging wells in the lowlands and the plains. He had farmers and vine dressers actively working in the mountains and in Carmel.
And if you connect this to the bigger geopolitical picture, that agricultural base is his secret weapon.
How so?
Well, you can't have a massive standing army or secure borders if your people are starving.
Right.
By focusing on the soil first, Uzziah was building the economic engine that allowed everything else in the kingdom to run.
An army marches on its stomach.
Exactly.
And speaking of the army, once he had the economy humming along, he turned his full attention to defense.
He fortified Jerusalem, the corner gate, the valley gate.
But then he did something that sounds surprisingly modern to me. The text says he made devices invented by skillful men.
Yes. This is one of the most fascinating technical details in the entire Chronicles account.
I mean, we aren't just talking about better shields or sharper swords here.
No, these devices were placed up on the towers specifically to shoot arrows and large stones.
So wait, we're talking about ancient artillery.
Essentially, yes.
Like catapults or ballistas.
The source notes describe them as machines similar to crossbows or torsion engines, and this gave him a massive tactical advantage.
I can imagine.
Think about it. He could strike enemies from a distance with a level of power and accuracy that literally no one else in the region had at the time.
It was a technological leap.
A huge one.
That is wild. It changes the whole dynamic of a siege if the defenders can just drop a massive rock on you from 300 yards away.
It would be terrifying.
So he has the tech. And looking at the stats provided in the source here, he definitely has the manpower to back it up.
The numbers are staggering. The source lists 2,600 chief officers.
And those officers were leading an army of 307,500 mighty men of valor.
Over 300,000 troops.
For a kingdom the size of Judah, that is just a massive military force.
It really is. And he didn't just send them out with whatever farm implements they could find at home, which was common.
Right. The text says Uzziah prepared shields, spears, helmets, body armor, bows, and slings for the entire army.
The entire army. That implies a level of state organization and centralization that was incredibly rare.
Because usually in the ancient world, you brought your own gear to the fight.
Exactly. If you were poor, you brought a club. If you were rich, you had a bronze sword. Uzziah completely standardized the military. This was a highly professional fighting force.
So what does a king do when he has an economy that's booming, an army that big, and technology that advanced?
He expands.
He expands. And this brings us right into the geopolitical side of his reign.
He went to war against their traditional enemies, the Philistines, and he broke down the walls of Gath, Jabneh, and Ashdod.
But he didn't just break things and leave, did he?
No.
This source mentions a very specific strategy he used after the fighting actually stopped.
And this raises a really important point regarding historical military strategy. After conquering the area around Ashdod, Uzziah built new cities and settlements right there among the Philistines.
The source makes a really interesting modern comparison here. It talks about planting populations.
It does. And just reporting impartially on what the source material says here, it draws a direct parallel between Uzziah's strategy and modern geopolitical debates regarding settlements to secure borders.
Right, the core idea being that a military victory might be temporary, but demographics are permanent.
Precisely. By establishing settlements of your own people in a conquered or disputed territory, you effectively integrate that region into your national sphere of influence.
And just to be completely clear for you listening, the source isn't taking a political side on current modern events.
No, not at all.
It's just using Uzziah's tactic to show that this is not a new idea in the slightest. Uzziah was actively securing his western border by changing who actually lived there.
Correct. It's simply reporting on the historical efficacy of that specific tactic. And for Uzziah, it absolutely worked.
His fame spread all the way to the entrance of Egypt.
Even the Ammonites were paying him tribute. He became the undisputed hegemon of the Levant.
He was marvelously helped, as the text says, till he became strong.
Till he became strong.
And that little word, till, that is the exact hinge upon which this entire story turns.
It really is. We are moving rapidly from the Golden Age directly into the tragedy.
Yeah.
2 Chronicles 26.16 says, "But when he was strong, his heart was lifted up to his destruction."
It is the absolute classic hubris trap.
The oldest story in the book.
The source analyzes this deeply. It suggests he basically started feeling independent of God.
He thought, I am the king, I built the agricultural hubs, I designed the catapults, I conquered the Philistines, I can do whatever I want.
And the specific whatever I want that he decided to do was enter the temple to burn incense.
Yes.
Now, to a modern listener, that might just sound like a minor procedural error. Like, oops, I walked into the wrong room of the church.
Right, it doesn't sound that bad to us.
But break that down for us. Why did this provoke an absolute constitutional crisis in Judah?
Because it was a direct violation of the separation of roles that God had established. Burning incense on the altar was a duty strictly reserved for the priests.
The sons of Aaron.
Exactly. It wasn't about who had the most ability or who was the most powerful. It was purely about authority.
Okay.
The king had civil authority, he had military authority, but he did not have religious authority inside the temple. God had drawn a very clear line in the sand.
And Uzziah just decided he was big enough to step right over it.
He was effectively saying, I am above these rules. I am consolidating all power, state, and church into myself.
And he didn't just waltz in and oppose either. I really love the bravery in this next scene.
It's so dramatic.
Azariah the priest, not the king, the priest goes in right after him, and he brings 80 valiant priests with him.
I love that the text specifically calls the priests valiant, because think about it. It takes serious guts to stand in front of an absolute monarch who commands an army of 300,000 men and just say, no.
They tell him straight up to his face, they say, "It is not for you, Uzziah. Get out of the sanctuary, for you have trespassed.
And this right here is the moment of decision. Just visualize the scene for a second.
Okay.
Uzziah is standing there in the temple. He's holding the golden censer. The smoke is rising. He has a choice in this exact moment. He could have just put it down.
He really could have. He could have apologized, backed away, and walked out.
But he doesn't.
No. He gets furious.
He gets absolutely enraged.
And while he's raging at the priests, he's probably threatening their lives, maybe even reaching for a weapon. What happens?
Leprosy breaks out on his forehead instantly.
Let's talk about a dramatic scene. 1 minute, he is the most powerful man in the known region, screaming at his subordinates. And the very next moment, the physical mark of divine judgment is literally blooming on his face.
And the reaction in the room is just immediate panic. The priests see it and they grab him and thrust him out of the temple.
But the text adds this tragic little detail that I think is so telling, because Uzziah himself hurried to get out.
He knew in that split second, all the anger just evaporated and he knew he had lost.
He knew the Lord had struck and he had completely collided with that order of life we talked about earlier in the show.
Exactly. When God is prioritized, life is ordered. But when you invert that, when you put yourself above God, it leads straight to destruction.
So the man who built the towers, who loved the soil, who commanded all these armies, how does his story end?
In an isolated house. That is the exact phrase used.
Wow.
He was a leper until the day of his death. He was entirely cut off from the house of the Lord, which is the very place he tried to force his way into. He never saw the inside of the temple ever again.
And even in death, he couldn't escape the stigma of it. The source notes he was buried in a field belonging to the kings, but he wasn't allowed in the actual royal tombs.
They said, he is a leper. It's like his entire legacy was permanently asterisked.
It is such a somber end to what was really a brilliant career. But there's a historical note here that the source brings up that is definitely worth mentioning.
The Isaiah connection.
Yes. The prophet Isaiah actually recorded Uzziah's acts and Isaiah's specific call to ministry. You know, that famous vision in Isaiah chapter 6 with the seraphim in the throne room that happened in the year King Uzziah died.
It connects the geopolitical history to the biblical prophecy so perfectly. It's almost as if Uzziah's earthly throne had to be physically vacated for Isaiah to see the real eternal throne.
That's a great way to put it. So Uzziah is gone. It's a tragic end to an incredibly glorious reign. And now the crown passes down to his son Jotham.
Right, Jotham. He takes over the kingdom at 25 years old.
And he reigns for 16 years. The source notes that he actually died relatively young at 41.
He did. But in those 16 years, he presents this really fascinating contrast to his father. I mean, he has to govern in the shadow of this massive success, but also this terrifying, very public failure.
The text says he did what was right, just like his father Uzziah.
Mm-hmm.
But then there is this specific parenthetical note that I think is the key to his entire life. It says, he did not enter the temple of the Lord.
He learned the lesson.
He really did.
He saw what pride did to his dad. He probably had to see the leprosy on his father's face every time he visited him in that isolated house, and he made absolutely sure not to repeat that specific mistake. He respected the boundary.
However, the source points out a nuance here about Jotham's reign that is honestly a bit unsettling. It says that while Jotham was a good king, the people acted corruptly.
This is such a critical distinction when we talk about leadership.
Yep.
You can have a perfectly righteous leader, but that doesn't automatically mean the broader culture is going to follow suit. Jotham was personally faithful. He kept all the rules, but the people were still morally drifting.
But despite that cultural corruption happening on the ground level, Jotham still got a lot done. He was a massive builder, too, just like his dad.
He was. He built the upper gate of the temple. And he did extensive fortification work on the wall of Ophel.
Let's pause on that for a second because the expert notes define Ophel for us. What exactly are we looking at there geographically?
Ophel is the ridge that runs directly south from the Temple Mount. It is a core part of the original city of David.
Okay.
So by building up the wall of Ophel, Jotham was actively strengthening the very center of Jerusalem. It shows he was deeply concerned with security, but specifically the internal security of the capital.
And he didn't stop at the capital. He built cities out in the mountains, and he built fortresses in the forests. It seems like the apple didn't fall far from the tree when it came to major infrastructure projects.
And the same goes for military success. He fought the Ammonites, just like his father, and defeated them.
And the tribute numbers listed here are incredibly specific. The source says they paid him 100 talents of silver.
Which, if we do the math on that ancient weight, is about 75 pounds or 34 kilograms of solid silver. That is a very significant amount of hard currency.
Plus, they paid 10,000 cores of wheat and 10,000 cores of barley.
And they paid that tribute for 3 consecutive years.
That is a massive transfer of wealth.
We are talking about basic staples, pure food security. It shows that Jotham successfully maintained the regional dominance his father had established. He didn't just let the kingdom crumble because his father died in disgrace.
So if we pull back and look at this whole picture, we have 2 very successful kings. One ends in tragedy and isolation, and one ends, well, steadily.
Steadily is a good word for it.
The source gives a very specific reason for Jotham's steady strength. It says, "So Jotham became mighty, because he prepared his ways before the Lord his God."
Prepare his ways. That is the absolute key phrase.
What does that mean to you in this context?
It implies intention. It implies consistency over time. Uzziah started well, but he let the success and the power go straight to his head. Jotham seems to have maintained a much steadier, perhaps much humbler walk. He actively ordered his life in obedience.
It really brings us right back to that core theme the source material started us off with, the order of life.
Precisely. The source argues that when God is given first place, he takes responsibility for the needs of life.
Right.
Uzziah prospered as long as he sought the Lord. Jotham became mighty because he prepared his ways before the Lord. The main variable here isn't military skill or economic theory. Strictly speaking, according to this text, the variable is their spiritual orientation.
It is a really powerful lesson when you lay them side by side. You look at Uzziah, he had the brilliant inventions, the war machines, the geopolitical settlements, the widespread fame.
He had it all.
But one single moment of unchecked pride, one moment of thinking he was the ultimate source of his own authority, and it was all effectively over. He spent his final years completely alone, staring at the walls of an isolated house.
And then you have Jotham, who perhaps wasn't quite as flashy. We don't hear anything about his fame reaching all the way to Egypt.
No.
But he stayed the course. He kept the boundaries. He didn't let the immense power of the throne consume him.
But there is still that one lingering thread from the text that just nags at me. The people.
Yes, the people acted corruptly.
It's so interesting that the source specifically highlights this. You would naturally think that with a king who prepared his ways, the whole nation would just enter this golden age of morality too, but they didn't.
It connects really well to the prophetic books written around the same time, like Isaiah and Hosea. The leadership at the very top was sound, but the actual heart of the nation was rotting from the inside out.
It really makes you think about the limits of political leadership. We always tend to think top-down, right? If the top is good, the bottom will be good.
We do. And that is actually a thought I would love to leave you listening with today.
Let's hear it.
We so often look to our leaders, whether that's kings, presidents, or CEOs, to set the moral compass of a society. We tend to think that if we can just get the right good guy in charge, everything else automatically gets fixed.
But the story of Jotham suggests the exact opposite.
Exactly. Jotham was a good guy. He did what was right. He respected God. And yet, the people still acted corruptly. So, here is the provocative thought for you to mull over. If a leader's personal example and their political power aren't enough to actually change the culture of a people, where does the responsibility for a society's morality truly lie?
That's a great point.
Is it possible that we place way too much hope in the palace and not nearly enough in the public square?
That is a very heavy question to chew on. You can have the best walls, the highest towers, and the right king on the throne, but you just can't legislate the human heart.
Precisely. The order of life is something every single individual has to choose for themselves.
Well, on that note, we are going to wrap up this deep dive into the kings of Judah. It has been a crazy story of soil, soldiers, pride, and leprosy, and a really stark reminder that how you finish matters just as much as how you start.
Maybe even more.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.